let's kick this off. So in the session, we're going to be talking about effective strategies for demonstrating the value and securing budgets for research ops, which I think is a topic near and dear to everyone's heart. And Kate Towsey is obviously going to share her experience, particularly from her book, Research the Scales. If you haven't got a copy of this yet, which I hope everyone in the room does, then you should get a copy. And I think we're actually giving away 5 copies. So half the people in this room are going to get a copy if you want one, if you don't have one already. And so for those that don't know, my name is Ned. I'm co-founder and CEO of Great Question. We're the all-in-one UX research platform built for the enterprise, and joined by Kate Towsey, who needs no introduction, but we'll give her a little bit of coverage. Obviously, her time in research ops, not only in founding the research ops community that I think most folks are a part of, the ReOps Slack, but also most recently leading research ops at Atlassian, as well as her time at the Government Digital Service. And I think this is a really timely topic for us to talk about, particularly as we come into the new year and people are thinking about how am I going to be asking for more budget, or how am I thinking about the impact that I've had with our existing budget, having those conversations with other leaders in the organization. And so we're going to talk about that. So Kate, maybe tell us a little bit about your book, Research That Scales, in this context of budgets and impact.
Yeah, so one of the topics, one of the chapters really is, just as a note to Carly, I've gone to like a big gallery view. That's Carly for anyone who, there we go, I'm back, but Carly, now I can see me. We will get this right in a moment. Carly, by the way, is works with Great Question, is behind the scenes producing. So Ned, to your question, I've got the book in front of me. So if you see me moving around in it or looking down, chapter 10 is called Money and Metrics, and I'm staring at myself. It's a little weird. There we go. Okay, right. I've got Ned. That's great.
I'll hold the book up. Maybe that's what I'll do.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is brilliant. So Money and Metrics, that's chapter 10, and really covers how do you get money into the organization or into the research space so that you can do more fantastic research? Or it might not be more research, but bigger or different or more complex or more subtle types of research. It's not always about bigger and faster. That's something to set up right at the start, is that scaling isn't always about bigger, which is quite surprising to a lot of people. And it's not always about fastest, and it's not always about biggest either. So it's really about how do we get the right money in to do the right kinds of research at the right time, and how do we spend the money in the right way so that we get more money in the future. So that's really one of the elements. I call them the 8 elements of research operations. They differ from Emma Bolton's amazing 8 pillars of research ops, which is confusing for many. Those are more viewed from a research leader's point of view, and they include things like advocacy is one of the pillars, for instance. Whereas in the operational space, for instance, money is not mentioned in the 8 pillars, which is not to be derogatory about them. They're incredibly helpful, but it's just such a critical thing. You will not operate unless you have money, and we are research operations. We're here to help you operate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's maybe rip into then the start of this. So, you obviously built and managed the Atlassian research operations team, which was, I think, recognized by everyone. I was still actually talking to somebody about it today, about what you achieved there. It was the benchmark for scaling research to hundreds of people. Can you share maybe some key insights or success stories from that experience?
Yeah, so I think one of well, there's a number of really interesting stories, but one of my favorite ones is, I'll tell 2 stories. One was just before I left Atlassian, about 6 months before, and this is key to the overall story of how you get money into research and research operations, which really should dovetail, even if that research is being done not by a research team, but by a design team or a product team. So not to exclude those folks either. And so one of the big strategies that came through was working on accessibility. And the head of accessibility was a fantastic, highly strategic person, just remarkable and really inspiring in terms of how do you come up with a really good strategy. And he was working at executive level and had buy-in at that level and investment. And so I spoke to him and said, well, if you're going to be working in accessibility, we know that there needs to be research on accessibility. What does that mean? And you're going to need to recruit participants who are living with disabilities, which is a very specialist space. It needs particular tooling,
Mm.
particular community. Everything is very particular about it. And I would argue about all types of recruiting, really. Um, but for sure in that space, and I'm sure that anyone here will be kind of nodding along. And we would need a specialist team to focus on the operations around the actual recruiting, but then also sending a thank you gift. It can't just be, it needs to be a thank you gift that's accessible. And so the full flow of the experience of taking part in research needs to be thought through. And so together we made a pitch, and it lined up with the company's one of the company's
Mm.
key strategies, which made it significantly easier to get budget for that work.
Mm.
Now, had I stayed and had headcount not been frozen, because it was a year and a half, 2 years ago now, I can say without doubt that we had very measurable priorities around that money. It wasn't just, hey, we want to do recruiting for accessibility. We had set out, here are very key priorities that we're going to deliver within the next 12 months. So it was time bound. It had measures set around it. We're going to recruit X number of people for this number of projects. So highly measurable. I need this number of people and this amount of money to be able to deliver it. And this is what you're going to see for your money over time. And so I know within the year of having gotten that headcount, been really focused in what we delivered, and hitting those numbers and then showing value above just hitting numbers, here's where we're really actually making impact. You continue the investment and hopefully grow it over time. So that's story number one. A really fun story was, and also another really good tip. It's a sneaky tip, but it's a good tip for getting money into research and research ops. Years ago, I was working with the Government Digital Service, and I wanted to deliver a video repository. This is now 2016 or something, long before we had all these amazing tools purpose-built for research on the market. And I really wanted to pilot this, and it was going to cost however many thousands of pounds. It was into the tens of thousands of pounds to pilot it. And I thought it would be very valuable to try and figure out, how do we use video repositories within the research space? And so I asked, where could I get the money for this? And I was told, go and speak to the director. He might say yes to some budget or not. And it was at this time, end of year, at least in the UK, it's in just pre-May, but around this time in terms of the financial year. And I went and I presented to him, and he turned around and said, I will give you all the money if you can spend it before the end of the financial year. The financial year was ending in a month's time. And he knew that it was impossible for me to deliver this project within a month, which meant that I wouldn't get the money. So he could say a free yes. And so I went away thinking this was a triumph, because I've got a yes for the money. Now I've just got to figure out how to deliver this project within a month, which was impossible to do. You couldn't deliver the platform within a month. But in conversation with the supplier, I realized that what I could do is I could deliver the platform onto a server within 2 weeks. And provided the procurement, the MSA and the procurement contract defined that that was delivery, and that they would be paid at that point, trusted this vendor and knew they would deliver in the long run. Provided the procurement contract stipulated that was delivery, it meant that I could deliver it within 2 weeks. So that's what we did. We signed the contract on that basis. The vendor delivered the platform onto the server within 2 weeks. They took screenshots to be able to show later on that that was achieved. We paid them, and I had my money spent. And then I spent the next 3 months truly actually delivering the program of work. It is naughty, but sometimes that's what you got to do to get things done when you don't have budget, right? About 3 or 4 months later, I was called by the auditing director, because this was in the cabinet office. This is like no little organization. And he phoned me and he said, I knew him reasonably well. And he said, so you've been picked up on an audit. And I thought, okay, here we go. And I knew that I'd done nothing wrong because it was all contracted. It was clear as day. That's what was there. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that it has been picked up. We know exactly what you did. Smart, but naughty. Don't do it again. So, there are multiple ways of getting money into research. You want to stick within the guidelines, typically, but sometimes you do have to bend the rules in bigger organizations to get something through so you can prove your value so that you can get money really the straight way the next time round.
Love that. And I think part of what I take away from that is understanding the constraints of the system that you're operating in. And in this case, it was we've got this budget by this end of period that I can give you the money for. Atlassian, it was about understanding what the organizational goals and who had the power that you could go and leverage and like how to,
Yeah.
do smart related goals against that. Um, uh, and I think about my own experience when that sort of my villain origin story for starting Great Question was, being thrown into an organization where I was tasked with building the product strategy and going to the research team and being told, we can't help you as much as you would like because our strategic goals for the whole company don't ladder up to the thing you're working on,
Yeah.
right? And that I think you were able to overcome something similar at Atlassian, which is awesome. Um, and so now you're like obviously working with like all kinds of companies and hearing all these
Mm.
stories all over the place every day, through the Cha Club, or generally through your own Kate Towsey consulting. Like, maybe you can talk about how different organizations are able to shape their strategies for accessing budgets and budget dynamics.
Yeah. So one of the main things that I like to point out is that we're never working with an organization ever. That's a
Mm,
it's a it, we, we're always working with people and typically working
mm,
with a person. And so a salesperson will tell you that there is a human being that you need to convince, and you need to understand who that human being needs to convince and who that human being needs to convince. And so for me at least, it's really helpful for me to understand I'm not working with organizations, I'm working with people, whether it's like it's a massive, like an IBM style company or a tinier company, it's always a human being. And that human being we all have different ways of processing information, of being ignited by information. Some people are very numbers orientated. That's what really gets them. Then they go, wow, this is amazing. Other people just see numbers and their brains switch off. Some people are really ignited by stories. I'm one of those. I happen to have a love for numbers too. Um, and you could tell them amazing story, and that's going to sell them into the concept of what you're doing. But then their manager needs numbers. And so one of the best things you can do for yourself, no matter whether you're a small team, a big team, a huge company, a small company, forget about that. You're always engaging with a human being. Find out what it is that they want to, not just what they want to hear, but how do they communicate? What ignites them? Is it stories? Is it numbers? Is it a bit of both? Are they highly pragmatic? Are they emotional? Find out what their next in line needs because maybe they need numbers and prepare those numbers so that when they go, they can have a successful conversation. So with all of my clients, that's one thing is to really kind of get down to the basics of that. And then the next critical thing, which is oftentimes what it comes back to, is have a clear vision, have a strategy. There is a very unfortunate theme in our modern world, not just in research or any other, it's in the modern world, that strategy is a hand wavy, future focused, we're going to Mars or wherever, Jupiter type thing in 10 years' time or 5 years. It's got to be this long-term vision. You have a crystal ball to try and it's terrifying, right? Or you love it and you make something up based on how you think you're going to get somewhere. Now, for someone like Elon Musk, dare I mention his name, he is making very practical plans to get to Mars. And I really admire that. So I'm not saying that's impossible, but particularly in the current economy where change is an ever-present feature, making these 5-year plans is not where you have to be. And if you are making 5 years long-term plan, you better be making really practical plans for right now. So in terms of me working with organizations, I'm always bringing them back to what is your strategy? What does the strategy mean? It's a clear and practical plan in response to your immediate challenges and opportunities. Okay, so we've got to find 3 priorities because no one can do more than 3 priorities. That's the maximum. Even Disney only had 3 priorities with a massive team behind them. So what are your 3 biggest priorities? And then behind those priorities, how do you measure them? What time do you deliver in them? What do you have right now to deliver them? What do you need to deliver them? How practical is it that you get those things that you need? So it's really working through all of those details to try and get to a very real, rounded human sense of what you're going to do first, second, and third. And then from a financial point of view, what you need to get there. I have one last critical point on this, which is actually related to a blog post I have in my brain to write. Another thing I often see, and it doesn't matter who I'm working with, this will come up, is great, we need all this money to do this thing. Well, how is it likely you're going to get 100,000 to 300,000 million, whatever you need within this financial year and within this economy? Slim. Okay, so the priority doesn't work. It's not practical. What you need to do is go and have a look at your Keep the Lights On, your KTLO. I will publish at some point a spreadsheet that you can use to kind of work this out. It's vital that you list every little thing that your team or you does over a week, a month, or a year. It's typically a month. Add it up, because if you've got, like, say, I don't know, 40 hours a week and you're spending 44 hours already, and now you want to do something in your strategy that is going to take like 10 hours a week, good luck. So knowing where you are right now in terms of your numbers with what you're spending financially and time-wise on things will give you a really good leverage for understanding what you've got space to do and what you need to buy in order to do more. Does that make sense?
Makes so much sense. I was
Right.
just reflecting on, I can't remember where I saw you write about it. Maybe we were talking about it, is like the number of people that maybe don't understand what their cost is to the business. They've
Mm.
taken that time to even think about what is the cost of keeping the lights on, and then therefore what is their weight on the business. But then also the counter to that is what is their the leverage they're bringing to the business? What's the opportunity that they bring to the business? Which I think speaks a little bit about what you're talking about here.
Yeah, it does very much so. And so I've spoken to some people who should go unnamed, who said that they at least know what their price tag is on the corporation's general ledger. The general
Mm,
ledger is something that execs will look at to see what are we spending where, and shareholders sometimes will see that too, as far as I know. But they were saying the $3 million, and that's easy. That's not even a big research team. When you
mm,
started adding up salaries and tooling expenses and everything, that's actually quite nominal. But that can stick out like on a huge corporation. It's not the massive amounts of money, but it's still big enough that you might go, oh, hang on a second, what am I actually getting for
mm,
this?
mm,
So the job of a research leader is to know, what is that number? You should know it offhand. How much are we spending as an entire unit? I don't believe, at least, that you're going to be ever able to go, okay, we can tie our $3 million a year to a particular outcome. It's so difficult to do because knowledge is not about, it's
mm,
just not as measurable as selling a car to somebody, or selling, we had cookies in a previous talk I did with you.
mm,
It's not that
mm,
measurable, but what you can do is your researchers, use your research abilities and skills to be able to measure, even if it's not through surveys or things, what is the perception of the value that we're giving, not just to our friendly
mm,
product managers and designers or whatever, but to the overall organization. Where does
mm,
C-suite see us in terms of the picture of the value we're delivering? Because they're the people who are going to make the cuts, and they're the
mm.
people who are going to see the overall price tag of research.
Yeah, and how to find out what's important to them. Coming back to who are the people and what are their
Yeah,
goals, what do they care about? Because it is people that we're selling to in this
yeah,
context. What are their goals and how can I help them achieve them? Whether it's they're trying to get more profitable, how can research help them get that? We're trying to
yeah,
launch this new product, whatever those things are. Um, yeah, I totally resonates a lot with me. I think particularly when I'm wearing my sales hat, often understanding that goal for us as an organization helps us figure out even what solution we might offer to someone. Right now we're looking to
yeah,
trial something or test something, or we have a budget we need to spend, or my goal is to democratize research at scale is very different to my goal is to support this new accessibility initiative, and these are the concerns there, and then that,
yeah.
anyway, I'm with you there. Um, uh, I guess
Can I,
that
can I can I add something onto that? Actually, there's something really
great.
important in there, because what I sometimes, speaking about clients that I work with on strategy, sometimes it'll be like, oh, okay, so everything is only these three things, but what about all these keep the light things on that don't fit into my strategy? A strategy doesn't need to encapsulate everything you do and
Mm,
every bit of money
mm,
you need. It's like that's all you're going to go for. It is your priorities. It's the thing that you're going to put the most into at the cost of other things. But what you're going to do is you're going to also need to look for money to keep the lights on the much less sexy things. I mean, you're not going to be punting this up to C-suite. So everything doesn't have to be laddered up to C-suite or tied up to huge budgets. Your priorities really should be, because they're going to drag money down into your organization. Then over time, you need to make sure that you've worked with your finance people to look at what is my ongoing cost in terms of running this thing in the long run, so that each year your budget is growing. You're dragging money
Mm,
down through big initiatives. You've
mm,
worked out to keep the lights on. They know that this is not a one-off cost. It's an ongoing cost to
mm.
maintain this. The value's there. And so you keep growing what the value that you're delivering in the organization.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a ton of sense. Great. Well, I guess I'm going to move on to the section I've got subbed as becoming a money magnet for research. I'm like, who doesn't want to be a money magnet? Um, like, how can research leaders, and including some of the folks in this room, like identify and articulate the value of their initiatives to secure funding? And I love that you highlighted it's very hard to um, quantify the value that research delivers at times, or knowledge delivers, I should say. It's hard to like quantify that. I was at an offsite yesterday, or actually an onsite at a company, and they have a policy of 2 days work in the office, and they're going to move it to 3 days. And I think Amazon is now at 5 days. Everyone
Yeah.
must come to the office. And I was like, somebody asked the question, how do they measure the impact of that? What is the metric that says
Mm.
this is delivering something for the business aside from costing us more in the snack bar or whatever it is? And I don't know if they are articulating that. I articulate and similar sort of challenge, I think, to sometimes knowledge management. Anyway, getting off track. How are you
Yeah.
thinking about articulating the value of initiatives to secure funding?
I think it's an excellent analogy, actually. Articulating it at the end of the day, we hassled with this when I was running the ResearchOps team at Atlassian, because we were walking the talk, working according to strategy, measuring things, um, and we'd have long debates about how you're measuring the value of something, because ultimately a
Mm,
lot of our work was laddering up into how we're delivering knowledge or the skills to create new knowledge into the organization. Um, the same thing goes with, what we would come down to was actually we couldn't measure the impact of knowledge, because that's in someone's mind, and someone might learn something here, learn something there, pick up something there. They might read a report, be at a presentation, and go and observe something. And then at some point in 6 months' time, a few things connect together and they have a light bulb moment that they wouldn't have had without all these experiences that you've provided. So that's impossible. I argue it's impossible to measure that. But there are two things in there. One is that that person will feel empowered. And if you're present enough in that process, you don't just dip in and out now and again, they will be able to understand that the reason they've got that ability to make really smart, well-informed decisions is because they've come to a research session, they've seen amazing researchers, they've done all these things. And so they have the feeling of trust. I trust the source of knowledge that I'm getting. I know that it's good knowledge. I feel empowered to make really good decisions. They're giving me value, and I'm going to keep
mm,
going with that and hopefully grow it. I want more and more people to feel this and have this ability within the organization. So that's something that you need to deliver, but is not measurable unless you speak to people and you do some qualitative work around that. On the other side, you must, as I've said already, have measures around, for instance, if you're wanting to empower people to create their own knowledge or do their own research, in different words, um, how many people are you going to teach to do research? What kind of
mm,
research? What sort of tools will you roll out? We think a great question. The ability to measure how much research is going on. You can measure
mm,
volume. You can't necessarily measure the quality of the research at the end. You might be able to get your researchers to dip in and do some qualitative looking at these things. You might put a training effort in place, someone who's coaching and looking at, okay, we're doing pretty well, but it's not where I want it to be. I'm going to upgrade it. So I think that answers the question in a bit of a roundabout way. I'm going to step back for a moment and just recap it to be clear. Have your measures. The things that you can measure, measure
mm,
them. How many
mm,
people? How many videos are they producing? How much,
mm,
all the stuff you can measure, measure it. Find a few key things to measure and be absolutely diligent with them over time. And that's in chapter 10 of Research That Scales. Evolve what you're measuring as well. And then on the other side, have your nose and your ears and your eyes into the organization, because researchers have these skills. to get a sense of, do people trust what we're saying? Are they using it? And if they're not, do some really hard thinking and looking at why and start to work on that.
Love that. That's also good. And I think normally I sort of treat these webinars as more like a podcast interviewing you and whatever, and you're the expert and things like this. And I've spent a ton of time thinking about this. And given the small room, I feel like we can have this more candid conversation maybe. I think so I've kind of got my perspective how I think about this. So I'd love to spar with you and get your sort of feedback on some of
Mm,
this, some of the things that I've been thinking about. I think partly you're talking about stakeholders here, and I think the thing I think you're looking for is that you want those stakeholders, those executive stakeholders, or whoever is going to be making some of these budget decisions, to say to themselves, I know that when I need to make a high risk decision and I do really well informed on it, that I can trust the research team to help me get a deeper understanding of the problem. I
yeah,
think that's really the statement there. Then I'm going to continue to invest in this thing because otherwise I'm hanging out on a limb, making these decisions on not enough information.
yeah,
Um, and I think measuring that is really tough um, because how do you get that out of it? I actually love Pedro Vargas's researcher effort score in this way, where
yeah,
it's like, okay, if we go and survey our executive leaders or anyone in the organization and ask them, what is your perceived effort to find past knowledge or to recruit for a study or to get qualitative feedback or understanding about a problem easily accessible, whether it's delivered through people or tooling or whatever. I think that feels like some way to unlock this, and then also be able to track over time as we deliver these programs, how are these metrics changing? Because yes, I can tell you how much research was run, and I know we can't tell you the quality of the research yet. We'd love to talk to you about that at some point. But it feels like we're sort of heading in the right sort of direction. Um, I think the final part that we've been thinking a lot about is what role does Great Question as a tool or tools in general have in helping to do these measures? And so we've been thinking about rolling out research effort score to all of our
mm,
customers to understand how that changes over time, but also in tracking the funnel, which we do today to some extent, is like how many studies were created, how many
yeah,
were launched, how many recruits were filled, how long did this take, how's that changing over time, how many
yeah,
insights were consumed from the repository on the back end of that to know that had impact, and by which teams, which at
yeah.
minimum might allow us to understand, well, this team has been launching, their products haven't been that successful. How much research have they been running? Is a lot or a little? And maybe that helps them to diagnose where there might be innovation black spots that they need to look at. Anyway,
I
some
love that.
random
Yeah,
ramblings.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that because we used to do I had one person, Anna, who was my numbers person on the team, and she did all of our procurement stuff. She was the best friends with finance, and she also did a quarterly operating report and an annual operating report. And so every quarter, um, across the variety of tools and things and processes that we had numbers about how many people were doing training, how many people being recruited, who was doing the most recruiting. And what was really powerful
Mm,
about that was, it goes back to the idea, which I love, that, money is one number, but there are other numbers that tell stories that can help get the money. Um, and so you would see that actually there was a team that was doing a lot of recruiting and a lot of research, but didn't have a full-time researcher on board,
mm,
or hadn't come to any of the training. And so there was that black spot
mm,
right there. And so,
mm,
could we go and have a conversation and say, hey, this is amazing. You're doing 100 studies a quarter or whatever it was. Um, can we be of more assistance? Can we help out? Can we be involved in a friendly way? Not because we want to dive our noses in and interrogate the quality of your
mm,
research. We want to dampen your spirits, but just so we can kind of support and train, etc. So that was very, very powerful. And then the other thing was, as soon as you've got those metrics coming through regularly, after about a year, they actually start to be of value and make sense. Initially, it looks like a waste of time. You just got to keep going. Is then you start to see some trends and you can start planning financially as well. So you're not just kind of going like this, I don't know what I need next month or next
mm,
quarter or next year for recruiting. You can be saying, well, January, February, March, typically quieter, but then things uptick, da da da. And so you can go to your financial, your kind of finance partner within the organization who you should know very, very well during planning And you can quite confidently and with all the metrics say, we need X amount of money to continue to support recruiting. And
Mm,
it means that you're not stuck short at some time during the year.
love that. Um, yes, I'm going to keep moving on with this because I feel like we could keep talking about that piece for a while. Maybe you could talk to me about like common misconceptions in
Mm,
research that might impact this budget allocation and how can we get it past this? And it's funny we're talking about some of this stuff because some of these things I feel like is general. It's not even research ops specific. It's not even ops specific. It's like how do you identify your company goals and how your work lines up to it as a salesperson, as a product person, as a research person? Like it all is the kind of same
yeah.
thing. How do you advocate for yourself and budget? How do you demonstrate impact? How do you manage stakeholders? But anyway, coming back to the question, yeah, common misconceptions around this budget allocation and how do we counteract those?
Mm. I think there's a I guess some of it is a misconception that you just got to kind of like ask your finance person at the end of the year for some money and like fingers crossed, hope for
Mm,
the best.
mm,
Then that's, I don't want to kind of insult anyone because it's not everybody and it's not all the time. But
mm,
if you, the more planning and friend making you put into your budget, the more you're going to get paid off in the end. So one of the other tactics, just going back to tactics at this point, is aside from kind of sneaking projects in last minute and things like that, is to have a few projects that you want to do. A good example was we had noticed that we had a lot of kind of help material, support material at Atlassian. And it had just sort of grown over time. And we didn't have a time to create a content strategy right at the start as a small team. Initially, it had been 5, and then we grew to kind of 12. And so this content had just grown and grown. And we noticed that it was difficult to navigate. People weren't really getting around it, and there weren't any really clear signposts. So I wanted to bring a content strategist in to really kind of step back and look at um, what is like, how should we be doing? How do we take a top-down approach to the content? That costs money to get a consultant in to do that. So what I
mm,
did was we procured someone early on. We got the MSAs in place and everything. All we had to do was raise the PO. And no one that in an organization, there are always people who are bad at spending money. People might be good at getting it and really bad at spending it, which means you won't get it next year.
mm, mm,
And so you can be, if you're friends enough with your finance partner and they know that you're trustworthy with spending money on time, you can go and say, is there any funding in the department left over that's not been spent and you're worried it's not going to be spent? Because that doesn't make them look good because they've asked for it. It's been allocated.
mm.
Because I've got this project MSA set up, I can deliver it within the time frame that we need. No sneaky business. Um, can we raise the funds? And
Mm,
a lot of the time, you'll get stuff done in that last little part of the financial year. About this time, I guess you've got like it's probably a little bit late. Well, you've got a couple of months left, I think. It's about this time that you can go in with some projects that have already been procured, that are well planned out, you can all documented, and you can get that funded and seen through. I don't know if that answered your question, but it just reminded me of sort of a tactic we haven't spoken about.
Didn't answer my question, but I loved it.
No.
And I think the thing that made me think about and kind of the tip for folks that are listening is end of the year is such a great time for so many things, not for those same reasons for budgets hanging around, that kind of thing. I think two things come to mind. One is we often get all these requests at the end of the year. We haven't spent this budget. Can we give it to you in research incentives? And so we can use them next year. And you're like, yeah, great. So that's like a common
Yeah,
request we get at the end of
exactly.
the year.
Yeah.
But I can probably word this in a better way, but this is also a great time of year to put the screws on your vendors in general.
Mm,
Maybe not the people vendors, but maybe on the software vendors, I'll take it to
yeah.
say, hey, if we sign this by the end of the year, what are you going to do for me? Because
Yeah.
that's like everyone's trying to make their end of year goal or end of quarter goals and all that kind of stuff. And that's a very useful tactic.
So I've
Yeah,
just connected this to your original question,
great.
which is sort of vaguely something in my head. It's one of the assumption is that you kind of ask for money and then you get your money and that's it. And it's not often realized this is the opportunity to kind of go back and find out what's left on the table, what other people haven't
Mm,
spent,
mm,
and scoop it up. And it's
yeah.
amazing what you can do. For us, we got the content strategists. They came in, they delivered amazing work to understand a complete roadmap, reorganized all of our content, helped us have some structure and some templates. And we wouldn't, that helped to really step forward in terms of what we were offering. And in a sense, it was for free, obviously not to the organization, but it wasn't money that we even had allocated until the very last end of the year. So
Mm,
don't think that what you've got is what you've got. You can always
mm.
go out and see what's available, what's been left on the table.
Love that. Um, how can research tools like Great Question support research team in demonstrating ROI and advocating for funding? We've kind of touched on a
Mm,
little bit of this, but
we
yeah, you
have.
might have some other thoughts.
Yeah, not additional, but I think it's really that one of the big things is there is actually an additional thought here, is don't just procure a tool like Great Question and go, great, job done. We've now got access to
Oh,
the tool, like have a strategy
mm,
behind it. Like, why are we procuring Great Question? What are we going to do with it? What value are we going to deliver into the organization? Next question, how do we measure at least the mechanical, the measurable stuff of that value? And then how do we start to like dig into nose about for the end like line of like how has it changed people? Are people feeling more empowered? Are they feeling more knowledgeable? Are they feeling more able to do more research? Are they feeling that it's easier and quicker? What are those things? Not the measurable stuff, but the sort of more
mm,
feely stuff around it, which is important. So that is the big thing. Just whatever you do, don't do it without strategy, which includes being able to measure, which includes be able to like match up and show this is the value we're delivering. Um, I love, speaking of Pedro Vargas, Luana Cruz, she has
hmm
internal rate of return, um, and also from both from Brazil. They've got an incredible. I'm dying to go
mm,
visit. They've got such an amazing research ops happening there. An internal rate of return means that the return that we get, it's costing us less to have this tool in-house, or we're getting more value out of it than we're spending. And I think it's to make sure that people have even a sense of what that internal rate of return is.
love that. We should definitely do a road trip to Brazil.
Yeah.
Maybe next summer.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that idea.
but yeah, I agree with you. I think that the kind of final the IRR, I love that, and the research effort score I think comes into this as
Yeah,
well. Having a strategy
brilliant.
behind it. I think lean on your vendors for this kind of stuff as well. They can help you
Hmm.
with some of this. And then I think the final piece that even internally we talk about this a lot is close the loop. It's like go back to that finance person, go back to them, shout, beat your chest, and be like,
Yes.
"This is what we delivered. This is how it went,
Yeah.
and isn't this amazing? And now look at what we're going to go into next year." Like I think that is just like so critical.
Yeah.
Question
Yeah.
from Thomas Stokes. Do you find that certain aspects or types of research or tools are easier to secure budget for than others? Cool.
Yeah, it's a good question. Oh, it's a great question. You have that every single
Boom.
webinar all the time. I held it till about 45 minutes. So
Pretty good.
typically recruiting, because it's
Mm,
such a pain when it's not tooled up well and systematized well and organized well. So that's typically the easiest to get funding for, in my experience, which is good work if you work in the recruiting business. Um, the harder ones to get funding for can be knowledge management, um,
mm, mm,
libraries and things. You can actually get very, very reasonable tools in the library space from the traditional
mm,
library space. They don't do all of the work that the sort of more research orientated insights management tools do, but they're amazing. Um, so it can be more difficult to prove that you actually need somewhere to organize your research, which is bizarre. But yeah, I think just recruitment's that really like annoying and felt all the time. And it really is seen as the thing that slows people down.
I think the other one, actually, I'm speaking to Thomas's book here, but it feels like services, agencies, consulting also because it's not this like fixed ongoing cost. It's more discrete project
Yeah.
based. At least it can be, and it does not going to hit the capital expenditure side of
Yeah.
things. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Uh, Cool. I think we might skip, given timing and things. I might skip because I want to make sure we get to some Q&A. If you do have questions, start throwing them into the chat. But I guess looking ahead, like how can companies looking to scale balance, like looking at current needs versus future growth when it comes to budget? I think we kind of covered on that with the
Yeah, with
idea of like,
KTLO.
yeah,
Yeah.
KTLO and uh, I guess. Maybe you can maybe let's maybe skip that one. Let's keep
Yeah.
this moving just in the sake of time. Um, And maybe this is a boring question, so tell me pass and I'll move on. What do you see as the key trends shaping the future of research, Kate Towsey?
I I don't think this is boring actually. I think maybe this is a future question. So I might blow up one of your future questions, but there's
Sure.
a few trends that I'm seeing. One is obviously artificial intelligence. That's a huge trend. No surprises there. I think there's
Mm,
some really interesting work for, and to your point earlier, it's not like this is unique in research. It's just how do we work with this within the research lens? How do we get artificial and human intelligence to interoperate in the best way possible? I'm seeing a lot of trend where organizations are calling for efficiency, which in this case, efficiency
mm,
usually means cheaper. That's not the only definition for efficiency, by the way, but usually
mm,
these days it means cheaper, more for less. And so they're often seeing AI as the answer to that. And I think that we've still got a lot of work to do in the next several years to really figure out where does human intelligence and artificial intelligence waltz? Where does it dance
mm.
beautifully so that we get amazing, trustworthy knowledge out the other side that we all trust, not just the researchers, but the consumers as well. So that's a big thing, and I'm very excited to see where we go. And I hope that I'll have some time over the next year to really dig into that aspect and figure out, for at least for myself and what others are trying to figure out around that. The other theme that I'm seeing in terms of budgets and finances is a lot of organizations who are growing their research operations teams are hiring internationally in lower economic zones.
Mm,
And so we're seeing a lot of people being more and more job roles being just generally opening up in research ops, which is amazing. But also
mm,
in Mexico, in India, in places that are on a lower economic zone than places like Europe or the USA. The problem there is that there is a lot of enthusiasm, but not a lot of experience. And so the teams that are getting given this headcount, it's like, I've got a headcount, but I can't hire because there aren't people with the experience and the training in the countries that the
mm,
headcount's been allotted to. I think there's a massive opportunity to train people up in these areas in these countries so that when the headcount comes, there's a match, which
yes.
I'm not seeing at the moment. So that's another trend that's happening, and I think that that's going to stick around for 2025. And then the other one, as I mentioned, is efficiency. Massive calls for efficiency, left, right, and center. Um, do more with less. And I think it's unfortunate that efficiency has just been about cheaper, when efficiency shouldn't be just about do the same things cheaper. It should be about step back, decide what is the most important thing to do. Again, going back to strategy, and then be really efficient and structured and planned in how you deliver that thing so that you're using your funds for the right things, not just
Mm,
for everything as cheaply and as fast as possible, which is what I'm seeing right now. And I hope people will take the time to step back and use, maybe buy something expensive, but it's really well placed and it
mm,
really delivers
mm.
value.
Mm, mm. Yeah, love that. Love that. Especially interesting to see platforms or tooling or people also put up their prices, and you're like,
Yeah.
I get it because they understand the value that they're delivering and how unique that is and things like that. Yeah, I think I'll throw my hat in the ring on some of these things. I am seeing more
Yeah.
offshoring type things where people are hiring, and the way we've been hiring remote people since 2012, under the guise of, am I trying to hire best, most talented person, or just the best, most talented person that lives within a 20-mile distance of my office? Um,
Mm,
and I think this is going to be a great thing for Brazil in this case. We know they've got a thriving scene and actually
yeah.
great stuff. It might not work with every time zone, every country. We actually have, I think, now 5 engineers
Oh,
somewhere
amazing.
in Brazil, in a
Yeah.
place called Florianopolis, which is one of 6 Silicon Valleys of the South.
Wow.
And so that's been awesome for us. And yeah, I can see that continuing.
Mm,
The efficiency, do more with less. I think the trend that we're seeing on that side is more push for democratization, or
mm.
tool consolidation.
Yeah.
So, hey, we don't want 12 different tools. We want to come down to one or two to make things more efficient and need less people to go
Yeah.
and run those things, and less cost. But also, we want more PMs and designers at the edge of the organization who are making decisions to have more customer empathy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because we've got less researchers now, or just they're working on other strategic initiatives, but and your priority is not their priority. My ultimate view here is that I think democratization and AI is ultimately going to lead to us having more strategic researchers total that exist in the world and more research ops people total that far more than what we have today,
Yeah,
because these
completely
systems
agree.
can't run without that, and it's demonstrating value. You're like, if a PM intern can produce this, imagine what a real researcher could produce. Like that is valuable. Now imagine what they can do.
Yeah,
That's the world I
exactly.
envision.
Oh,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's such an opportunity. I mean, researchers have been through hell and back, ResearchOps too, in the last few
Mm,
years, along with many
mm,
people across industry. But what an opportunity. We're in a place where researchers have always been saying we're really skilled, and then many
mm,
people going, oh, but now I'm just testing features all day long. Some people
mm.
really love that, but
Yes.
many people wanted to do something that was more aligned with C-suite. And here's the opportunity. And I'm hearing more and more exactly what you said, that there's a call for bigger research operations teams to come in with really slimmed down toolkits with a tooling
Mm,
stack to be able to get the rest of the organization doing tactical, feature-based research as quickly and as effectively as they can. And
mm.
then the researchers are taking a very long elevator up to the C-suite to start to
Yes.
do really interesting strategic research, not research strategy, that's a different thing, but strategic
Hmm.
research, which gives them a deep understanding of where the priorities are. And that's where you can start to hook into and go, okay, here's where the money is. I regularly quote it, but Joe Biden has said as saying, and I note in the book that I tend not to quote politicians because you usually get in trouble somewhere along the line. But
Mm,
instead of saying, if you want to know where people's priorities are, look where the money is.
mm,
We all say like, you can sign up to the gym at the
mm,
beginning of the year, but if you're actually spending all your money on the restaurants, then that's like it's going out to restaurants as your priority. So
mm,
have a look for where people are spending the money, where the organization's spending the money. And, it sounds crass, but follow the money because it
mm,
doesn't mean that's all you do. You can do other sort of more aspirational things on the side as an added extra when you've got plenty of money coming in. But yeah, that's a really big thing. Is just like follow the money.
mm. Related to that, and this is definitely a side note, so I'm not going too far into it, is your sales team is the closest team in your business to the money.
Mm. Yeah.
Your sales team desperately needs research help. And if you help them achieve their goals, you've got it's a pot of gold that's going to be unlimited. It just is enormous.
Yeah.
Um, I think the final thing I'd say on that is we're seeing a lot of interesting things around AI and research moderation. Unmoderated and surveys kind of makes interesting sense. Moderated to me is such a big question. And I think the question that I have around that stuff, what is the role of AI researchers is how well can an AI agent build rapport with the research subject? I think is an interesting way to think about. Maybe really well. Maybe they don't need us
Yeah.
anymore. But maybe not. And I think that's an open question I've got.
Yeah, interesting. I heard just as again, a side note, not to go down because Ned and I could talk forever, but someone
Sorry,
posted on
everyone.
a Rosenfeld channel about you can put it like a chapter of your book or something into this machine and out pops a podcast, and it
Yes,
sounds like people
it's
chatting.
incredible. Yeah.
It's incredible, scary, incredible. Certainly, if you ever hear a podcast of mine, it will be me actually speaking because I'm going to be a Luddite on those types of things. Ned, we've spoken about real core, like the desire for
Yes.
real.
Yes.
So
Yep.
my year is about real core, but yeah, it is astonishing that someone could even. It's not just a chat bot; it would be have a conversation with an AI. I mean, who knows?
Um, and I'm going to leave that because we've got too many. We've got
Yeah.
to get some questions here. Hey, I've got some questions in the chat. I've got Dom Kirkwood and both love questions and reflections. If anyone's like, yes, plus one to this, or this is a topic that we think about, or hey, how do you think about this? Please throw it in the chat. But Dom Kirkwood asks, where have you seen research democratization work? What have these orgs done to
Mm.
ensure research delivers value without sacrificing quality and rigor?
So I can't speak about all organizations, but I can speak about Atlassian, which is predominantly where I've delivered democratization at a large scale. So we were looking after, I know from the operating reports, even from a couple of years ago, it was about 361 like active users each quarter of our operations, and we had about 600
Mm,
people signed in to be part of the operation. So my team of 12 was really innovating 365 or whatever people to do research every quarter. And that number was pretty stable throughout time. So large scale for a very small team, which is the ultimate. You want as small a team as possible, doing as much as possible in a healthy and balanced way. So the ways to get that right is to be very careful, as you said, about your tool stack. Be questioning which tools do we get on? How much does it take to keep it going? What value is it going to deliver into the organization versus cost? You need to be training people how to use those tools, but also training them how to use them well. So we had research training so that for certain tools, in order to even get access to the tool, you had to do training on privacy and research. It was short, 15, 20 minutes, and it was a remote one, so we didn't bottleneck you, like an on demand. But then you had other things to sign up on. How do I do good good interviews? How do I analyze data well? And we had full-time trainers working on that. And I had someone in my team who was an education specialist, had never worked in research, but came from the education world, designing all of the education and that sort of thing, and an amazing research coach as well. So make sure that you want to build the roadways for people to be able to move between tools, because they will need to move between tools. Give them full-handed service where it's applicable, and then let them look after themselves where it's applicable. You won't scale if you want to hold everybody's hands all the way through. Give them training in little chunks all the way through. And the reason I say that, and to your question, this is crucial. Someone will onboard into the organization, say they're a product manager or a designer. They will be onboarding into the whole organization. It's overwhelming. And then you throw some research stuff at them at that point. Then a month later, maybe they start to do their first recruit. It's all gone. So just signpost at that point when they're on board. We are research operations. We give you this. That's all you say. When you need us, we're here. Make it simple to find us. The month later, when they want to now do their first recruit, they get in touch because they know where you are. And you go, great. Okay, now I'm going to give you this training right now that's highly relevant at this point in time. It's a half a day, an hour, as small as you can make it. And so at each point in their journey, you onboard them at that point. And that's really crucial. It's like breadcrumb training, really, in a sense. The final thing, which is crucial, again, for democratization successfully, is do not assume that designers and PMs have the same needs or mindset or a notion of what research is. It's completely different. I wish that someone, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, Ned, would create a dating app style recruiting platform for PMs. Because in my experience, typically PMs don't want to recruit a cohort and then sit and do a cohort of research like a designer or a researcher will. They want to date, in a sense, a customer. They want to meet and have coffee with the customer virtually or whatever every 2 weeks, just for that immersion or to cover a recent thing. And so it's much more of a case of automatically set me up, or can I quickly scroll through people and pick someone who's interested in dark mode and checkouts or whatever. So it's just they have a very different mindset. So don't just design one system and think it's going to work for PMs as well. You are likely to have to design for designers and researchers are nuanced again if they're doing strategic more research, and then your PMs are different there. If you can cover those bases and go for I'm going to go for the most common cases of everything and design an excellent experience for the commonalities, and provide people with the knowledge and tools to be able to go off piste as they need to get their particular type of research done, you will be able to use a small team to scale out decent enough services, not perfect, but decent enough services to hundreds of people.
Love that. It's that data is actually we've as a case study I need to present, Kate, we should talk about, where a team that we're working with has democratized to I've got the number here, to 380 people with a team of 5, which is crazy. So these things I think are continuing to get as time goes on, as we learn all these things about doing this. I think to really answer this question around how do we do this without sacrificing quality and rigor? First of all, I think rogue research is already happening, and I think the idea that it's not is insane. And so really it's how do we understand what is happening that then allows us to go and provide the trainings, to go and provide ways to improve it, to review it. And potentially, I think there's a role of AI to actually help us identify and lead those people to the right direction, to stop asking leading questions. But again, this elevates the need for researchers and research ops. Is
Yeah,
like, again, if a PM intern as a former PM can do this, imagine what a real live researcher could do.
and giving, empowering the researchers you do have in the organization. They're often, some people are keen on to be teachers. It's something they like to
Mm,
do. But they can't be having a PM just ping them every now and again on Slack or on Teams or whatever. Can you
mm,
look at this? Can you do that? They can't get on
mm,
with their work.
mm,
So empower them with
mm.
structures, operations around how to have office hours. Give them the ability to set up office hours and
Yes.
become a controlled asset for the organization in terms of coaching and education. That's really crucial. There's so much that you can do with a small team when it's set up with strategy, with measurements, with systems. And you get service designers as contractors in even regularly to step back and kind of have a look at, hang on, we just built, it's like when you see a house that you can see it's just been kind of designed and people have just stuck stuff onto this house as it's gone, instead of having it architecturally designed each time. Have someone comes back, the architect who comes back and says, hang on a second, you just added this thing on there, but how do people get there? How does it fit in with the wider ecosystem that you've built? Make sure to
Mm,
do that, and you'll continue to scale and scale well.
mm. Love that. This has been super awesome. Thank you. Thanks for everyone in the chat. What a cool group. I kind of wish we just all just jumped on a call together and everyone else could chime in
Yeah,
to do this. Next time, let's do
very
that.
cool.
Um, but yeah, this has been awesome. We're going to send out some copies of books. I'm going to mail those out myself tomorrow, and we're going to send a recording of this. Kate, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all the
Thanks,
time
Ned.
you
It
give
was
to everyone in the
always
community.
so cool to chat with you.
You too. All right. See y'all soon. Have a good weekend.
Cheers.
Bye.